Have you recently been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes or know someone who has? It's really tough navigating this condition at the beginning, and I'm here to help. My name is Louise. I'm a dietitian and a fitness instructor and the founder of Thrive Nutrition and Fitness. I'm incredibly passionate about the management of diabetes and so have designed this short series on just that, an introduction to type 1 diabetes. Now, there are thousands of resources all over the internet on type 1 diabetes. Why should you listen to me? So just a brief background. I am a dietitian and I graduated from UFS in the Free State in 2011. I furthered my studies at the University of South Wales to do a postgraduate diploma in diabetes and then a master's in diabetes. And I worked in the UK in the NHS as a pediatric diabetes specialist dietitian and am now a diabetes educator, and I have a private practice and the company Thrive Nutrition and Fitness. Being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes often comes as a big shock. It's very scary, it's not fun, and it can be very complicated and very overwhelming. So the purpose of this course is to just break everything down in very, very, very simple steps to help you understand as best you can, because the more you understand, the better you will be able to manage your blood sugar. So let's start off with a basic pathophysiology of type 1 diabetes. If you understand what is happening in the body, then the concepts of treatment are so much easier to grasp. So before you were diagnosed or before your family member was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, this is what would happen in the body. So the person would eat, and foods that contain carbohydrate are broken down into glucose. So carbohydrate containing foods go into the stomach, into the small intestine, and are broken down into glucose. The blood, like the taxi system of the body, comes around, absorbs some of that glucose and transports it around the body. So what we see here is a blood vessel, and these little S's symbolize sugar, so blood glucose, okay? And these little blocks are your body's cells. So your fingers, your nose, your eyes, your toes, the parts of the body that require glucose for energy. And you see they all have knives and forks. They are hungry. They want that glucose for energy. Another thing to notice here is that they are locked. They need a key. They cannot access this blood glucose alone. They need a key. So we have a little friend, an organ in the body called the pancreas. And the pancreas spends his whole life watching the blood. And as soon as there is excess blood glucose, he says, hey, cool, let me make some keys. He makes keys, and the keys make their way to the body's cells and unlock them, open them up, so that the blood glucose, or this sugar, can be used as fuel for the body's cells. Okay, so that's what normally happens in most bodies. What you see in this picture is no pancreas. So with type 1 diabetes, there is an autoimmune response. So your immune system suddenly sees the parts of the pancreas that are responsible for making insulin as enemies. And your body has now destroyed those things. And so the body, or the pancreas, can no longer make insulin. And the pancreas, or the function of the pancreas in this system, is now no longer active, and we do not have any keys. So there is actually no insulin being made. What then ends up happening is there is an overflow of blood glucose, these little sugars. The blood sugar goes higher and higher and higher, and the body's cells get hungrier and hungrier and hangrier and grumpier and more frustrated because they cannot get the energy that they need. They cannot get their food. So here what we see is blood glucose or sugar spilling over into the urine. So at the initial diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, or in the build-up leading to it, there might be a higher level of urine, so going to the toilet a lot, which ends up making you very thirsty, and you might get a dehydration, headache. Some of the symptoms, some of the things to be aware of if you might have a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. So glucose spilling out into the urine. Another thing that might happen, or that does actually happen, is when these body cells do not get glucose for energy, they make another plan. The body is incredible. It always has a backup plan. And what that backup plan is the breakdown of fat. So the body starts breaking down fat for energy so that the cells can actually function. And a byproduct of fat breakdown is a ketone. So the blood ends up being full of ketones. And you might have heard the word diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA. Ketones are acidic. And so often that is the initial diagnosis of somebody with type 1. They are hospitalized in diabetic ketoacidosis because of the high level of ketones circulating around in their blood. Okay, so that's the basic pathophysiology of type 1 diabetes. And this is just a picture showing the symptoms. So mostly because the body's cells was not getting glucose for energy, we feel tired. There's a little guy feeling really tired. So that glucose was leaking out in the urine. Water was following it, and we were getting dehydrated. Dehydration makes us very thirsty and also very tired, and a headache also comes from that dehydration. Okay, so these are some of the symptoms to look out for and what you might have been feeling initially when you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Then the very, very basics of treatment. We will go into this in more detail over the series, but there are 2 types of diabetes, basically. So the first type is type 1 diabetes, and that is when the factory, so the part of the pancreas that actually makes insulin, burns down. Those cells are destroyed and the body can no longer make insulin. So that is why we need to inject insulin. We need to perform the function of the pancreas. With type 2 diabetes, it comes over a longer period of time, and it's because the pancreas is being overworked and underpaid, for want of a better phrase. But what basically happens is that the functioning of the pancreas just decreases slowly over time. And you usually start with medication like metformin, glucophage, or some sulfonylureas. There are lots of different steps to go, and it's quite progressive. But you might start with some medication and lifestyle change, like a bit of weight loss, exercising, dropping your carbohydrate intake. But for this series, we're looking at type 1 diabetes, and you will need to take insulin for the rest of your life or until we find another source of treatment. Okay, this little dude, or these 2 little dudes, basically tell us why we need to control the blood sugar, okay? You might not feel like sugars that are a little bit high or a little bit low during the day make such a huge difference to your life, but they do. They make tiny, tiny little changes to your body, and we call these things chronic complications of diabetes. They start to damage tiny nerves, tiny blood vessels, and we see problems with kidneys, with eyes, with like the fingertips and the toes. There's a lot that can happen in the longer term. So we don't need to be afraid of that just yet, but we just need to know that treatment and controlling your blood sugar and keeping it within a healthy range is so, so, so important for protection against the chronic complications of diabetes in the future. Okay, and then this picture is just of food. So if you are now living with type 1 diabetes and are afraid to eat, you do not need to be afraid to eat. We will cover that a lot in this series. What can I eat? How can I eat it? When do I eat? When shouldn't I eat? What is wise? What is unwise in terms of food? Okay, so you can look forward to that in the series. I hope you enjoyed today. Please pop any questions in the comment section below. Happy to engage, and I'll chat to you again the next video in this series.